Hello and welcome to Foreign Policy Focus. This is episode 153 and I am the show's host, Kyle. On today's episode of Foreign Policy Focus, I'm going to be discussing the story that Trump has ordered the Pentagon to at least attempt to put together a military parade in DC. So I'm going to look into that and give my take. This seems to be a pretty popular story on Twitter and, Facebook and the mainstream media. So if this is something that you would like to share to get some, ideas of non-interventionist foreign policy out there, please do it. foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, the libertarianinstitute.org, or the Facebook page Libertarian Union. So just to, kind of go into the full story here, apparently what has happened is Trump has asked some Pentagon officials to either look into or actually just, ordered them to go ahead and put out a military parade. Now, there is some standing American history that this really isn't something that Americans do. We're not supposed to have a standing army, and we're supposed to have a civilian-controlled military, and the president is commander-in-chief. And it was even kind of a big deal that James Mattis became Secretary of Defense, being a military man. So there is some, kind of historical precedents that this will bump up against. Now, this does seem to be a real story. It looked like, I think I read in the Washington Post that they confirmed it with the Pentagon that this has been something that Trump had talked to them about. On the face of it, did have that feeling of the kind of story that the mainstream media seems to be just making up these days about Trump, or getting some anonymous source that makes up the story. Either way, this does look to be legit. Now, the reaction to this, especially on the left, has been absolute taking on from red meat. This proves that Trump is a dictator, that Trump is a nut job. Trump wants to be like Kim Jong-un. Trump wants to be like Putin. He's going to haul his missiles through the streets and say, here, look, North Korea, you should be this scared. And so I want to dive into all of that. In part, this is going to be a similar take I had on the situation as the Trump says mean things comment to when Trump said the things about Haiti and Africa, allegedly in a backroom meeting with congressional leaders. And so I'll go ahead and link to that show on the show notes page. But overall, I think it's important to note that while I don't think it's a good thing that Trump plans to throw a military parade in DC, because I do think the American tradition of not having a standing military, or at least, our Constitution not authorizing one, and the fact that we don't do these military celebrations and we don't over-glorify the military, and we keep civilian controls over the military to prevent America becoming a global empire like the British or like the Romans or the French or the Spaniards, who did so many terrible things with our empires. And we're not going to be those people. We came from, being controlled by that empire. We know the evils of it, and we're not going back there. However, the real fact is that has long been gone in America. We've had a standing army, really since the founding of the country, that really has maintained itself. And the idea that we were just going to be kind of a loose militia, it hasn't been the case. But even further than that, America has been fighting undeclared wars since World War II, none more blatantly than the wars in Syria, Libya, Yemen, the Clinton interventions in Iraq, for sure, the interventions in Iraq post Bush mission accomplished, so that would be the surge. And then what, could be called Iraq War III, or the war against the Islamic Caliphate. All the U.S. drone strikes in Pakistan, all these wars are completely, there's no authorization for them whatsoever. They like to use the 2001 authorization of use of military force, which was passed in hysteria after the day of 9/11. And it was meant to target the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, the people who protected Al-Qaeda and the people who carried out the terror attacks. Now, it's important to note that, Al-Shabaab in Somalia wasn't even formed at the time. On 9/11/2001. Same for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen, or the Islamic State even, I think that was 2006. And so the idea that we don't have a standing army and a global empire has absolutely not been true for a very long time. And so all this hysteria saying, oh my God, Trump's a dictator, and oh my God, look, Trump wants to be Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin. But the fact is that American presidents have been this person for years and years and years. I mean, you could go all the way back to Truman, who, against the advice of his generals fighting the war, dropped nuclear bombs. Of course, the Korean War, which absolutely flattened Korea under Eisenhower. The Vietnam War, which, spanned several presidents there. Kennedy, Lincoln, LBJ. Nixon, not Lincoln. More recently, the first George Bush going and committing a bunch of war crimes against the Iraqi army as they were retreating from Kuwait. The continuing bombing of Iraq under Bill Clinton, killing 500,000 Iraqi children. Bush's ridiculous war in Iraq, Bush 2's ridiculous second war in Iraq, and then his war in Afghanistan. Of course, carried out torture programs where America was literally plucking people out of villages in Afghanistan, flying them to black sites in Indonesia, or transferring them to Libya or Syria or Guantanamo Bay, and then torturing them at times to death. You had Obama, who was the drone president, who at that time had carried out more drone strikes than any other president, and claimed the ability that he could make a secret kill list, put American citizens on there, and then blow them up like he did with Anwar al-Awlaki. And so the idea that suddenly, just because Trump has a parade, doesn't mean that he is in any way a uniquely dictatorial or evil president. This has been going on for a long time. So I think I have a pretty cool analogy here, and this is, I think, what's been going on with America is, we're kind of like a car here. And for the past 50,000 miles, I don't know, maybe that's too long, maybe I should say 20,000 miles, we haven't changed the oil in the car, and the car's starting to run real bad, it's getting hot, overheating, all these problems it's having. Now, eventually, we're driving down the road and we hit a bump and crack the bumper of the car. Now, if everybody freaks out and says, oh my God, you ruined the car is now a piece of crap and it's not worth anything, and look, you destroyed the car. Well, that's really not true because, the engine's about to die and the car's pretty much worthless because you haven't put oil in it over all these years. And so I think that's kind of where we are with the Trump thing, is that Trump is kind of just like the crack in the bumper. It's just a lot more obvious than everything else that's been going on. And yeah, it's not a good thing. I mean, you don't want to crack the bumper of your car. I guess your car is worth a little bit more, whatever the bumper's worth, if you don't break it. But at the same time, the purpose of the car getting you from A to B is about to stop happening because, you haven't changed the oil in all that time. Now, the good news is that, I think there's the possibility that because you get a crack in the bumper, you take the car to the mechanic and then they're able to say, they open the engine, they're like, oh my God, you got no oil in here. What the hell are you doing? And then they're able to fix your car before the problem becomes catastrophic and terminal, right? So, maybe this isn't the worst thing. And Dave Smith is somebody who talks about this a lot, and that Trump is a very exposing person. And what he does is that he's so outrageous that although there's a lot of people who are hypocrites themselves and, mainstream media telling fake stories and all these other problems. And while Trump himself is just a loudmouth idiot, all these people end up exposing themselves and kind of what's going on because Trump is just so loud about it, where everybody else kind of does Obama and Bush talk nice, look nice, play by all the rules and do all the, formal engagement type of stuff. I think it's worth pointing out, too, that, while America may not have a history of having a military parade where we, drag a Minuteman missile in front of the White House every couple of years, let's be honest about what goes on in America. I mean, I love NASCAR, man, but geez, the militarism that you get trying to watch that is unbelievable. They used to have flyovers before every race. There used to be a car sponsored by the National Guard, but typically, there's one car or one driver that has either a military charity or a branch of the military on their car. There's always troops at the thing, and there's always thank you to our troops, and talking about how the troops are always doing the greatest things and they're always finding these moral missions, even though they know nothing about the missions themselves. Right? You got like Darrell Waltrip commentating the NASCAR race saying what a great thing our troops are doing protecting our freedoms overseas. I mean, the guy knows a lot about NASCAR and how cars go around a track, but man, the guy doesn't know an awful lot about what's going on in Afghanistan right now. But yet, he's up there going, oh, our troops are doing a great job and thank all of our troops. But, and of course, nobody ever talks about the U.S. government never pays for a Afghani girl. By the way, on the last show I messed up. I said that girl was 13, from the Mae Young, interview with Scott Horton. She was 4 years old, who had her face blown off and was blinded and lost an arm in a U.S. drone strike. This isn't the person that they're wheeling in front of the cameras and saying, look at what our Afghan war has done. Of course, the Super Bowl, I watched the Super Bowl there's always quite a bit of militarism at the Super Bowl. One, they always had the profiles of the troops that are overseas, and sometimes they bring camera crews there to talk to the troops so they could say, oh, hi to their families, but they're always showing them watching the game and celebrating or whatnot. And then, of course, I think at the coin toss, you had some kind of award recipient from the military, maybe a Bronze Star guy out there receiving or flipping the coin. And so they really push it in all these different places. And so it's not like the U.S. military is just sitting in their bases and the airplanes are in the hangars and the, tanks are in the storage yards and stuff like this. They're actively out. They're being displayed. People see them and come across them all the time. And then there's also the commercials. I mean, some of the commercials are done by Lockheed Martin and the other weapons makers where they try to show off their new planes, tanks, whatever they got going on. Other times it's the military glorifying the role. I remember the drone ads from when I was growing up when you could be a drone operator and sit there with a drone stick in the middle of the Arizona desert and save all of the brave men and women on the ground in Afghanistan. And pretending like things known as Reaper drones that shoot Hellfire missiles are not agents of death that murder and dismember little girls, but are rather saviors and angels hovering above the sky protecting our noble troops. Another pretty common speculation that I'm seeing is that this is kind of proving that Trump is something of seeing himself as a dictator in the lights of a Putin or a Kim Jong-un. In part, I don't think this is the case for everything I said prior. I mean, Trump knows that he has a button that he could push to destroy the entire world. And so it's not like Trump needs the U.S. military displayed in front of him in order to gain respect and, feel like his, hands are big. There's also the issue with the American military, at least that, I mean, we have the missiles and whatnot, the Minuteman missiles, but the real, I think, shining part of the American military, and I think what the Americans would call their ultimate force is their Navy, which you really can't parade down Pennsylvania Avenue. Right? The USS Ronald Reagan, the biggest aircraft carrier that we have, the most upgraded one, brand new class of aircraft carrier. Not going to be able to display that. Our nuclear submarines, which I think are probably the best part of the American deterrence, won't be able to display that. The bombers and F-35s, I mean, maybe you could fly them over, but at the same time, you can't, roll them down the street in front of our leader. One of the things you have with the Kim Jong-un military parades is that you parade all of his, thousands of troops, their artillery, and their missiles, their long-range ICBMs. And that's all they have, right? So Kim Jong-un is really showing off the class of his military by holding these military parades. And that just logistically doesn't seem to me to be the case for the United States. Again, with the North Koreans, they have a massive, I think, 1 million man military, and that number may be overstated. I've read some articles that suggest that they really inflate that number. However, they could line up, lots and lots of people outside of Kim Jong-un's presidential palace. Well, for the United States, and we have a lot of these active duty guys, there's a lot of specialization in the American military, and the idea, I think, for the North Koreans is they just have a lot of infantry guys and guys that can run artillery. Where the United States would see, we have fighter pilots and we have shipmen and we have special forces and a bunch of drone pilots and CIA operatives and all this other stuff going on. And so, again, it just logistically, and then the way DC is set up, it certainly looks like when you see the pictures coming from North Korea, there's a really good place and outside of Kim Jong-un's presidential palace to line up all these troops and weapons. And that isn't so much the case in DC. The other speculation is that this is some kind of show of force by Donald Trump to either North Korea or Iran. Again, I don't see this as the case for the same reasons I just laid out before, because this really doesn't show the might of the American military, and nobody really questions the might of the American military in the sense that we could, wipe your civilization off of the planet. We certainly are a threat to the Iranian government. I mean, we could bomb the Ayatollah out of existence. Now, the problem then becomes, are we going to kill every Persian? Are we going to try to fight a counterinsurgency? How could we possibly control Iran? Same problem we have in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places. But for fighting a conventional war against the state, I mean, we could, wipe out any state on the planet. It's just the problem with war is, especially for the Americans, if it comes to nuclear weapons, it's not worth it. You gotta kill a lot of innocent people. But the idea is just who could blow up, whose tanks better. The United States is clearly really good at, we got tons of weapons for that kind of stuff. And so there's really it's not like the Ayatollah is sitting over there thinking, oh man, maybe the American military is really weak and I could exploit it. You know what I mean? There's an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf right off the shore. There's one in the Indian Ocean. We have the base with 10,000 troops in Qatar. We have 8,000 troops in Iraq, 2,000 troops in Syria. We have missile batteries all over the place. Turkey has nuclear weapons. Israel, we have F-35s there. Israel's have F-35s. Saudis are more or less a satellite state, so are the Emiratis. So it's not like the Iranians don't see every day, so much more often than any American citizens, the might of the American military. And the fact that there, would be very little that they could do if the Americans chose to wipe the Iranians off the face of the earth. The Americans could certainly do that. No question about it. The Iranians would have little chance to prevent it. If we want to commit genocide there, we absolutely could. Right? All the nuclear weapons, all the aircraft carriers, even, I point out the problems with the F-35 and how we're wasting all the money on this technology. However, if we wanted to commit a genocide with it, I suppose we could. And as I said, Iran may be able to launch some missiles back, maybe sink an aircraft carrier, but at the end of the day, the Ayatollah will be dead and a lot of the Iranian population will be too. And like I said, these countries don't need to be reminded of it. The United States doesn't need to launch a Minuteman missile to show Kim Jong-un that we have nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un knows damn well that Americans have nuclear weapons. We're constantly threatening him with them. He knows we have the aircraft carriers. There's 3 of them parked off his shore. One permanently, I think that's the Reagan, the brand new one there that's permanently parked in Japan. We have missile batteries in South Korea and Taiwan, in Guam, in Japan. And so the North Koreans, again, need no reminder about the might of the American military. So that's most of my discussion, I guess, on the Trump thing. I think I laid it out pretty clear that, while, like I said, this does matter in that it's a step in the wrong direction. If you look at where we need to go, this is simply a signpost on the road. It's a crack in the bumper of our car, but let me tell you something, people. We've been doing a lot of nasty things with this military for a very long time. We have hurt a lot of people. And for people to be, hyperventilating because Donald Trump wants to hold a parade, it makes absolutely no real sense. Just some of the other people in the world that would need no reminder about the American military. If we look in Syria, we had a conflict there where American troops are just occupying Syria. Assad has said several times that he doesn't want American troops within his country. There's no real reason for the United States troops to be there. We're not really fighting ISIS anymore. And yet we're going to continue to occupy that country in defiance of our NATO ally, Turkey. And what happened is apparently some Syrian forces allied to Assad attacked or have alleged to attack a base where the United States and coalition forces were potentially training some members of the Syrian Democratic Forces. For those of you who frequently listen to the show, you know that the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, is the U.S. coalition of native Syrian forces that we use to say that they invited us into Syria and that's why we're there. And it exists in eastern Syria. The vast majority of this group, the SDF, is the YPG, which is the Syrian Kurdish militia. There are some Arab forces within the SDF, but most of the time when you're talking about the SDF, you're talking about YPG forces. Because of the location of this base, which was in the Deir ez-Zor province, which is pretty heavy Arab land, we're kind of getting out of the Syrian Kurdish territory now whenever you move as far down south on the Euphrates River as Deir ez-Zor. And I know the U.S. is really pushing to train Arab troops for the SDF as kind of a make it look good measure. These I think are more or less playing the same role as the moderate rebels in Syria, where the United States knows if we give weapons to them, they're going to end up in the hands of the YPG, just like they knew that when we gave weapons to the, Free Syrian Army, moderate Syrian rebels, within 2 months, those weapons, that money was going right into the hands of the jihadists. And so we know that, if we give weapons to the Arab portion of the SDF, the YPG is just going to take it. But training them up and saying, hey, look at all these Arabs we have fighting, I think one could be helpful if the United States is planning a long-term occupation in Syria. And two, could help make it look good on the international stage, especially for the Kurds. Or for the Turks, Turkey, who opposes the United States Army and the YPG, because Turkey sees the YPG as a terrorist organization.
Back to the story at hand here, we have Syrian allied forces attacking what is believed to be this training post. About 500 soldiers or militiamen were apparently involved in the attack, and about 100 of them were killed when U.S. coalition forces repelled the attack with airstrikes and artillery fire. Apparently, several tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed. As far as I've heard, only one person within the U.S. coalition was injured, and I believe that was a alleged SDF militiaman and not some American trainer. However, this news could be complicated. Some of the other countries in the coalition would be pretty hesitant if any of their soldiers got killed or were injured training Arab forces in Syria, and so we could find out more information in the days to come on that. So the big question would be, why would this militia attack the SDF position? I think there's a couple possibilities. One, we have some reporting coming out that the United States is taking in some of the Al-Qaeda or ISIS jihadists to make up the Arab force to control the Deir ez-Zor and protect the Deir ez-Zor province in Syria. And so, I don't know how clear the lines and battles would be, and if this is a possible mistake, but these guys could have been going out looking to attack ISIS and Al-Qaeda and ended up coming across the U.S. or attack this position knowing the U.S. was there because the United States was training ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That may not be the case, but it's definitely something that's going on. Another possibility is that, some of these outside forces aren't completely under Assad's control. And so while it may seem that because this is a portion of the Assad coalition attacking, it could be provocation from another group within Syria as a militia, Iran, Hezbollah. There were reports that possibly Russian mercenaries were killed or were involved in the attack. And so the instigator could have been somebody other than Assad. The last possibility is that maybe they were going for an oil field. There's a lot of oil fields in the Deir ez-Zor province. And maybe they felt that the United States and SDF left one underprotected or not protected at all. And they would be able to quickly swoop in, secure the territory, take the oil field, and then say, what are you going to do? Shoot us for it? However, maybe it was a trap. Maybe they have bad intelligence, whatever. They end up going in, there's a bunch of troops there, and they attack them anyways. And there's also the possibility that Assad ordered it for God knows what reason. I think it's important to remember that Assad is winning the Syrian civil war here, and it seems more and more often that people are just kind of accepting that the Assad must go narrative isn't going to come true. And so it would seem really peculiar for Assad to pick a fight with the SDF when he's, just now finally mopping up the Al-Qaeda and ISIS forces in the rest of Syria. There's also the issue that with the YPG fighting Turkey in the Afrin province of Syria, and I'll get to updates on that in a second, that Assad's probably in a good negotiating position right now with the SDF, and it seems that attacking them would maybe make that less likely. And so it just doesn't seem to be in a strategic of advantage for Assad to carry out this attack. Now, as you know, a lot of these places are just bad at foreign policy. I talk about all the time how Americans' foreign policy is constantly blowing up in our face. And so it doesn't mean that Assad isn't doing that either. I want to update Operation Olive Branch, which is going on in the Afrin province of Syria. So far, the latest number I have is 142 civilians killed, mostly by Turkey. Turkey has also arrested 600 their own people for protesting the event or the military operation there. Patrick Coburn reported, and I will link to it in the show notes page, a pretty groundbreaking article that Turkey is recruiting ISIS fighters to become a part of the anti-Kurdish militia. We have evidence of some of the, either Free Syrian Army soldiers, Syrian rebels of some kind who are involved with Turkey in the attack on Afrin, carrying out mutilations of female Kurdish soldiers in the Afrin province. It's pretty bloody. I'm not even going to link to it or get into it too much. If anybody's, really up for something like that, I'm sure you could find it just by Googling the keywords and that, but terrible things going on. And so far, it seems like it's pretty slow progress for Turkey in the Afrin province. This may be because they're taking it slow, trying to reduce casualties of Turkish soldiers, although it does seem like they're taking quite a number of them. Or it could be because the the Kurds have a lot of good weapons there. And they have a lot of anti-tank missiles, and so they are able to do a good amount of damage to the armored vehicles of Turkey. And it does seem like Syria and Russia are now doing a little bit to prevent Turkey from carrying out airstrikes in Afrin. Although I can't say for sure to the extent of that what it is. But it doesn't seem like at least they're able to carry out airstrikes deep into Afrin. And then just the last note here is we have the U.S. Lieutenant General in the city of Manbij, where the United States backs the Syrian Democratic Forces and the YPG, saying that the United States Marines there will not leave, even though Turkey has continually threatened to attack the city anyways. Before I wrap up the show today, I just want to update on Yemen and what's going on there. Another country that needs no military parade to know the might of the American military. Although typically they're feeling the brunt of the American military with Saudi or Emirati stickers slapped on the front of the American military vehicles using to bomb, blow up, or blockade their country. So the recent fighting in southern Yemen, right now in southern Yemen, there's two warring factions. One has the support of the Saudis, the other has support of the Emiratis. I don't want to say support in that they're getting airstrike or that kind of help, but support in, I guess, we prefer you to win the conflict kind of stuff. The Saudis were supposed to be holding talks between the two warring sides. It doesn't look like that's happening. It does look like the southern separatists are taking quite a bit of ground from the Saudi-backed government that has been, the government that Saudi Arabia is saying that they're going to reinstall in power in Yemen since the start of the war. We have a bunch of civilians killed in an American drone strike. It's just tragic. We had, I think, 121 U.S. drone strikes in Yemen last year. Of course, every time the U.S. government says, it's cool, everyone, we swear we're only killing the terrorists, and yet little children keep ending up dead, innocent people keep ending up dead, and it's just absolutely horrific. A last note, I guess, I don't have to get into detail on the story. I just want to point out the American government is going to spend at least $45 billion in Afghanistan in 2018. I don't know. It's just amazing to me how much money gets wasted nearly unnoticed. Okay, that's where I'm going to wrap up the show for today. Just a couple of notes. The show will hit its 1-year anniversary next year. And so, there's a lot of things coming up for the show, and I guess I'd like the audience feedback. So I have a group, Foreign Policy Focus, on Facebook. You can request to join it and let me know what you think of the show, what you like, what you don't like, and what I should do moving forward. For the first time, I had somebody reach out and say, hey, we might like to advertise on your show. So would you mind hearing some advertisements on the show if it means that I could improve either the audio quality or get some more guests on the show, or maybe run some ads to increase the size of the show itself? Or, if you're saying, hey, I really don't like the ads, but, we could do donations, and so that's the other option. And I don't know, there's a lot of possibilities. So let me know what everybody thinks. Join the group. Tell me what you think about, kind of where the show's going, where it's been, everything like that. Like I said, 1 year, it's pretty cool. We've been around for a while now. You can find the show and share the show at foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, on the libertarianinstitute.org, or on the Facebook page, The Libertarian Union. The show's on iTunes and Stitcher. Leave me a rating and review there. You'll find me on Twitter at KYAAALE. And I think that's it for the plugs. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in.